It is time now for Money Power Politics. In an exclusive interview with NBC News, President Trump says, and I want you to stop doom scrolling, just really pay attention for a second. He says the United States government could reimburse U.S. oil companies that rebuild Venezuelan infrastructure. The president did not say how much money that could cost, but I'm going to tell you, it's a lot. He believes that the oil industry could get operations, quote, up and running in fewer than 18 months. Oil experts would tell you a decade. So I just want to level set for a moment about exactly what's happening here. Nicolas Maduro is obviously no friend to the United States. But by sending our troops to Venezuela to overthrow him, Trump may have violated international law, sidestepping Congress, and threatened the world order. And while Maduro is locked up here in New York, his regime is still largely in place, and they will be as long as their oil reserves are open to U.S. companies. We do not know whether U.S. oil companies actually want to invest big in Venezuela again. Remember, that oil is not American oil. It is Venezuela's. Many years ago, U.S. oil companies made a bunch of very risky investments in Venezuela, and they got burned badly by Maduro's predecessor, who basically kicked him out. That history is still fresh in executives' minds. It is why Trump is dangling the carrot of big reimbursements if they buy into his plan. But for fact's sake, as I said, it could take a decade and billions of dollars for U.S. oil companies to rebuild infrastructure and get that oil pumping on Russian and Chinese oil fields, no less. And Trump, don't forget, he's leaving office in less than 3 years. Talk about it. Ron Insana joins us now. He's a veteran financial journalist and publisher of The Message of the Markets on Substack, and Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, Senior Associate Dean for Leadership Studies at the Yale School of Management. He's also the author of the new book, Trump's 10 Commandments, which is available now for pre-order. Okay, first, I want you to talk about, Ron, Trump even floating this idea that he would reimburse companies. It will take a decade to rebuild this infrastructure.
At best, yes.
At best.
And anywhere from $100 billion to $1 trillion to get there. So he said, the president said, that this would come either through some form of revenue, which we could assume would be borne by taxpayers, or some government subsidy, again, borne by taxpayers for an industry that is already subsidized by the federal government and by taxpayers. So there's only one way in which to do this, to reimburse them. I mean, if they're going to take oil out of the ground and sell it on their own overseas, they would, of course, have their own revenues and profits. He seems to be talking about something entirely different, as if the government were going to profit from this and the companies would get a cut.
Jeffrey, you talk to these oil executives all the time. Trump said he talked to them before, he talked to them after, but the U.S. still has sanctions on Venezuela. The same government in Venezuela is still in place, except Maduro, and the country is politically unstable. Is he really convincing these executives this is a worthwhile landslide investment?
It's the same people that seized private property, that seized U.S. assets, that are the accused drug traffickers, that are the murderers, the oppressors of freedom of expression, all the things that Trump is arguing against. It's the same administration, it's the same regime that's there. So no CEO wants to go back in. And let me tell you, I'm here to correct the record.
Do it.
When President Trump said 6 times that it's not going to cost the United States anything. He's changed a little bit today, but he said on Saturday it's not going to cost us anything. These companies will pay for it themselves. And then he said he talked with them. I talked with the CEOs, the exact CEOs. I won't name their names, but it doesn't take hard to figure out who they are. They told me they never heard from him. They had no advance knowledge, and they have no interest in this. Why would they have no interest in this? Well, part of it is they had won in many international tribunals billions of dollars that they never got paid. Well, they wrote them down. They don't have claim on it anymore. BP, when they wrote down their assets in Russia, they can't go back and claim them now. They're gone. They've already gotten the money for it by the write-down. Secondly, there's a huge oil glut. And in the oil glut, it's kind of suspicious. Why? If we had more time, we try to figure out why the Saudis had cut production when prices were twice as high as they are now. They cut production.
Put U.S. frackers out of business?
Well, I think they wanted to make Joe Biden look bad, and the Biden-Harris campaign to drive up inflation. It didn't work for them, as a matter of fact. What they did was lose market share, and now they're trying to gain it back when prices are half of what they were. So it's not working. But the Saudis and 7 other OPEC nations have added a lot there, but it's not drill, baby, drill. Rigs are down in the U.S. We're seeing layoffs. Chevron, the one company that is still operating in, of course, down there right now still, they've cut 26% of their workforce. ConocoPhillips has cut about 20% of their workforce. Baker Hughes says their rig count is lower than it's been all the way down since the COVID era. You know, it's historic lows. So the industry is no drill, baby, drill. They're laying off. The prices are $57, $58 a barrel. It takes $75 a barrel for there to be
Then
incentive.
if it's not for these oil executives, where does this whole idea come from? An episode of Landman that Trump liked watching on a Sunday night?
It's delusional, and that's the kind of thing that is in this book that you nicely feature. So I'm so glad you have a copy of it here.
There you go.
Oh, look, Ron already has his.
There you go. Focus.
Yeah, is that what we talk about in there is what he does is that he constantly, it's called the sleeper effect. You keep repeating a false information, and mass communications people have studied this for years. You keep repeating a falsehood, it eventually takes on a life of its own. People start to believe it, and that's what he does. He also does something which is like the Phil Spector wall of sound. Phil and I were talking about, the music producer. You create so much noise that people somehow just get distracted from the truth. What did Trump want to do here? Trump wasn't going after drug trafficking. You talked that in earlier segments, of releasing Hernandez and stuff like that from Nicaragua, or Honduras, rather. He wasn't interested in restoring democracy. Maybe he wanted to do something about checking Russia and China's influence. Really, what he wanted to do was to distract. We wouldn't talk about the things you were talking about in your show earlier, talking about January 6th, talking about inflation, talking about affordability, talking about the health care coverage, talking about the Epstein files. And guess what? Everybody did wipe that off the newspapers and off the airwaves this weekend.
Okay, it may have been wiped off the newspaper or the airwaves, but it didn't get wiped out of the American people's lives.
Absolutely
And when
not.
it comes to health care costs, when it comes to affordability, it matters to Louise Rule much more than foreign policy does. Look at any election. Look at how people vote. They vote with their pocketbooks much more than they even think about foreign policy. And the cost of this could cost us billions and billions. So even if these oil companies are cautious for now, the market's booming today. What do you make of that?
I don't know what to make of it, Steph, with respect to the stock market, with the Dow hitting a new all-time high, crossing 49,000 for the first time ever. Gold and silver both also rallied, which is a flight to safety type trade. So that's running in contradiction, if you will, to an equity market rally. Other than in the near term, nothing changes for the U.S. economy. It's not like we're suddenly pumping Venezuelan oil and driving the price down, which, by the way, hurts U.S. oil drillers if indeed the price were to continue to fall below $50 a barrel, would lower inflation. But there's nothing that happened over the weekend that changes materially the outlook for the U.S. economy, whether the Fed cuts interest rates, who gets put at the top of the Fed this year, what inflation looks like, what growth looks like. So the market's focusing on upcoming data. We get unemployment numbers this week.
Or the market is focused on, the president isn't looking at the underlying economy. What the president is showing us in the last 11 months, he's focused on hooking up big business. Just ask the tech industry.
Well, oil stocks were up. We have to say that. They helped drive the Dow up. I mean, Chevron was up. Halliburton was up. Valero Energy, which can refine Venezuelan oil, although not tomorrow, is one of the big beneficiaries of that
yes,
trade.
A lot of those Gulf Coast refineries had repositioned themselves to take on lighter fuel. It's very thick, heavy, viscous fuel that they get there. The crude from Venezuela is good for asphalt, and it's good for lubricants.
Not gasoline.
But not for gasoline, and that's a part of the problem. So there's not a lot of demand for that kind of fuel. And the price, the WTI, the price of oil, is the same as it was on Friday. It is today.
Wall Street always looking for new opportunities. They say today it's Venezuela, but don't forget, what can Wall Street do tomorrow? Sell it all.